power of an outside voice and an outside perspective can completely turn a business around, regardless of sector. And you'll love hearing from Dena Enos, how her organization Stronghouse has developed this power and has also integrated giving back to nonprofits as part of the company's business model. On this episode of Making Our World Better.
Welcome to the Making Our World Better podcast, where you will find motivation and encouragement through lively conversations with inspirational people who every day are making our world a better place. Now, here's your host, Jay Clark.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Jay Clark, and I am excited to have a conversation with Dena Enos, the founder of Stronghouse, a data-driven marketing agency that helps businesses flourish while simultaneously paving a new path for social impact. Dena's influence extends beyond her agency, and her dedication to growth isn't just measured in numbers, it's reflected in the positive ripples she creates across diverse fields. She spent her career innovating consumer and business-to-business marketing through quantitative approaches, and she started Stronghouse to innovate how marketing organizations optimize themselves and to create a whole new way of giving back through her professional work. Since its inception, Stronghouse has catalyzed growth in more than 100 organizations across multiple industries, including healthcare, consumer products, biotech, education, banking, travel, and in the nonprofit sector. Wow. Dena currently serves as the chairperson of the board of directors for Prosperity Catalyst. She is also the co-chair of the board of directors for Strategies for Youth, a member of the board of advisors for the UCLA Political Science Department, and served as a mentor for Hack Diversity and Build Boston. She graduated Phi Kappa and summa cum laude from UCLA with the highest honors in political science to make us all feel like huge slackers. And Dena, I'm so excited to have you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I would love to start simple and just tell us about Stronghouse.
Sure. So Stronghouse is a performance marketing agency, and the way that we approach working with companies, I think, is quite unique in that the goal is to strengthen in-house teams and build the competencies in-house so that you eventually don't need us anymore. So my objective is always to make myself unnecessary in a short period of time. And I always say that the highest sign of success is as I'm transitioning out of a project, the person or people who I've been working with are promoted or have taken on new responsibilities or have crossed a new threshold in terms of growth or scaling the business or responsibility.
Well, I love that. And I love how you lean into building a strong house, which is awesome. And it's almost impossible for a company or an organization to take this kind of 360 deep dive on their own, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard. And oftentimes it just takes an outside catalyst.
Totally.
I was actually having a conversation with the team just yesterday, a new project. So I'm still earning their trust. Mm-hmm. I'm still building that rapport. But one of the things I said to them, which I truly believe is, hey, listen, I'm probably going to say something that you guys have said 15 times, but for whatever reason, hearing it for the 16th time from a different person might put it over the tipping point and get the results. There's nothing magical about me, but sometimes it is about time and place. And often when companies engage with Stronghouse, they've made that mental commitment to changing how they're running their marketing and to changing that approach. And that in of itself is half the battle. So much of this is really about reassuring the teams in those instances, because I've been on the other side of it as a CMO internally, feeling like I'm, fighting to do my job. And sometimes you just don't have the two-way communication, and the organization or the leadership is not ready to make moves.
Right. Well, and I love a point you made there that I'd love to dig in a little deeper, and that's the power of an outside voice. And I mean, it's funny, we were talking about kids a little bit before we started. And if I tell my kids something 10 times, they might hear it, but if they hear it from somebody else, they're going to, oh, so, talk a little bit more about that power of an outside voice.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And I think what you need both the internal environment and the external catalyst. So in many ways, if you mention something to your kids, or if an internal marketing team is talking about, we need more data, we need better transparency, or we need to track the funnel more granularly, by socializing that internally, they're setting the stage, they're establishing the context for what they need for success. But organizations always have competing priorities, right?
Right.
And the dev team and the product team only have so many resources, and it's hard to get in that priority list, right? And so working with an external catalyst who can say, listen, I've worked with 10 other organizations in your stage, and none of them could be successful without access to this data or without visibility into this process. That often is what is needed to jump it from the middle or the bottom of the priority list all the way to the top. I also find that a way that I can be instrumental in moving things forward is suggesting to cut things up into chunks so that there's at least some incremental improvements, instead of saying we need all of this done at once. It usually helps with accuracy as well. And your development team will often appreciate it, because it can be divided into different sprints, and they can feel accomplishment with each sprint, makes QA easier. It just sort of becomes a win-win situation.
I love it. And, it sounds like you obviously have a very fascinating journey, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper too. So, kind of tell me how you got into this kind of work, and was there an aha moment for you when you're like, wow, this really can make a difference?
Yes, thanks for asking. So I think the foundation for what I do as a data-driven marketer, before I think the trends moved in that direction, is that I started my career in finance, realized that I love numbers. I loved understanding what made businesses profitable, looking at different P&L structures. I started in investment banking, but I didn't like the other aspects of investment banking. So figuring out how to take those quantitative skills and be more creative with them, frankly. And I had great success internally with marketing teams, including 2 startups that were acquired by TripAdvisor when TripAdvisor was under the Expedia umbrella. So that was just an amazing experience, truly one of the most remarkable experiences professionally and just in my life. But as my career grew more and I started getting the jobs that I always thought I dreamed of, VP of marketing or CMO of a publicly traded company, I realized that I was stuck in meetings all the time and I didn't enjoy the work. I felt disconnected from my team, from the customers, from my own creative voice, and the ability to really harness the data and make a difference.
Yeah.
And around that time, we were also starting a family, and being at a startup and 7 months pregnant is not easy either.
Hard.
So I was trying to figure out how to pave my own path. And the idea of Stronghouse came to be when I was reading the book written by the founder of Tom's, where he discussed his inspiration for the 1-for-1 model. And so I was thinking about how my free time was slowly, very surely going to be gone once our family expanded.
Yeah.
And that volunteering, at a shelter or a local community center was just not going to be feasible anymore. And I wanted to do more than financial contributions. And so this idea of, for every client who I work with, if I could donate marketing hours to a nonprofit of their choice or introduce them to a nonprofit that seems in line with their business mission, it was born and has been really gratifying for the last 9.5 years.
That is so cool because, I can't think of a nonprofit that couldn't benefit from these kind of services. And I also have a hard time finding one that could probably afford it. But the fact that you've incorporated that into your business model is so awesome. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about data,
Yes.
just from the standpoint of how it's evolved since you've started, the collection and how you're using it in decision making.
Right. It's a great question. So when I first started really working with data and partnering with engineering within organizations to sort of figure out what do we know, how can we harness it, what can we do with it, it felt like more was always better. Then we sort of moved into this big data era,
Mm-hmm.
and it truly became about, how many PhDs in statistics can you hire, how many people can you put into play to try and find pockets of revenue, or pockets of personalization or customization or optimization on the site to eke out another 3%, 4%. What I have seen in the last 5 years, and sort of the way that I've been trying to navigate my work, is that more data isn't necessarily better, and that it's really important to be judicious about what metrics you're focusing on, what you're prioritizing, and how you are acting on that information. I think we've all been in situations where you have either a Looker dashboard or a spreadsheet that the leadership team looks at,
Mm-hmm.
and it has 30 metrics.
Right.
I am very comfortable with my intellectual abilities, but I can't process
Right.
30 metrics.
Right.
I don't know where to look. I don't know where to focus. I don't know how to prioritize what I'm trying to achieve. I really find like distilling it to 3 to 5 metrics that matter, or even better, 3 to 5 customer experiences that you either want to make happen, want to improve, or want to capitalize on. That's the best way to guide it. And having the right team who can help you understand the data is very empowering. But that doesn't necessarily only require, the right statistical training. You need to know the business, you need to know your customers, and you need to have that experience where you know how to essentially craft a journey for the user that helps them understand that your company can give them what they're looking for. And sometimes you just can't find that in a spreadsheet, you can't find that in a database, right? You have to talk to your customers. You have to really pull results of several A/B tests together to piece what that story is.
Yeah. And I, thank you for that, because everybody listening should rewind. There's a master class right there in, what you should be looking for. And I think a lot of us as leaders, we can't see the forest through the trees, which again, I think goes back to probably a lot of the value that you can bring to clients is the fact that, hey, I can sit down with you and get into your business, and together I can help you figure out those 3 to 5 key things that you might just not be able to see because you're looking at 30.
Right. It's interesting too. What I often find is that internal marketing teams or internal leadership is often hesitant to say no, and they feel as they have to win or excel in all categories.
Such a great point.
One of the first things that I do is I ask for permission to say no, and to say, we're just going to focus on 2 channels. We're going to do them really, really well. And then we can talk about expansion. Because if you're trying to raise 4 boats that are capsized, it's a lot harder than trying to figure out how to get 2 back up. And moving forward. It's so hard when you're in that situation where either the marketing channels that have worked for so many years are either slowly dwindling
Right.
or all of a sudden stopped working, which a lot of companies experienced with Facebook when they made a lot of changes to the Meta product, with privacy changes, with sort of this return to search and people being curious about AI and how that configures into their consumer experience. So all of a sudden, things that used to be reliable aren't. And in a lot of instances, we as marketers became complacent
Right.
and we were scared to test new ads or new creatives because the one that always worked had always worked. So it's a lot about learning and it's about, taking one or two channels that you need to be on and is where your audience is, either your key demographic or another demographic that you're trying to expand to, and just really focusing.
Yeah. Well, I love it because when we talked about, talked in the intro about this broad spectrum of organizations that you work with, which that tells me, and I'd love for you to confirm, that really tells me that a lot of what you do is almost like universal. I mean, a lot of these principles, how to, pick the right data to look at, how to make decisions based on that data, how to strengthen your organization. Those are principles that if I'm running a nonprofit or if I'm running a biotech company, they're going to be pretty universal, right?
I think that's right. And another piece that I often find so interesting about how organizations approach marketing is they think very distinctly about B2C marketing versus B2B marketing. And there are understandably nuances for both. You're not thinking about webinars in consumer marketing, and you're not thinking about, your Shopify store
Right.
on the B2B side. But at the heart of both of them, you are trying to get a relevant message to your customer base and you want it to resonate. And businesses are made of people. I can't tell you how many times I will, review information for the first time, and I'll have to read it 4 times to truly understand what is being said because I'm not familiar with the jargon. There's so many, what I call like $50 words instead of $5 words, right? And at the end of the day, we're just people behind a computer or holding our
Right.
mobile phone, trying to make a good decision with very limited time.
Right.
And ease of language, getting straight to the point and straightforward kind of genuine discourse is usually what wins, usually what performs, usually what gets the message across to the end consumer.
Well, and think of that. If somebody who's a summa cum laude in political science from UCLA can't figure out what you're trying to say, you're outthinking yourself. Absolutely. So that's a great point. But if I'm a leader in my organization and I'm trying to decide, is it time for me to bring somebody in to really kind of take a look at this? Do I need to call Dena? What are some of those indicators?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say if your marketing growth has either stalled or been gradually declining for the last 12 months, I would say if the morale of your marketing team is quite low or their engagement with the business is quite low, and you can really sense that with body language, how often they're responding to emails, how often they're raising their hand to participate. And then I would also take a look at, are your transactions and your sales only coming from more of the same people, right? So are you just selling to your core base? And at some point, if your core base finds something else, or if they age out, you're going to run out of customers.
Right.
So those are probably the 3 most important pieces I would think through, because all of those are ticking time bombs.
Well, I love all of those answers because they apply to anything. If you're a nonprofit, substitute donors for customers, and it totally
Exactly.
applies there. And I also
Exactly.
love that it's not just numbers, that at the end, it's about people. So that's
Yes.
such a great answer. But if you think back over your career, what are some of the leadership principles that you've learned that you've really leaned on that you think others could benefit from?
Sure. And I was actually just talking with someone about this yesterday. So, a project that I'm on right now that I absolutely love, there's a very ambitious, super talented director of paid media. And we were having a conversation around executive leadership team meetings. And I shared with him, and we'll share with you now, when I was at TripAdvisor, I reported into the CMO, so I was not on the executive leadership team. And I had a lot of interaction with the CEO, Steve Coffer. Still grateful to call him a friend and mentor today. And I was just so frustrated that I'm getting, daily emails. This is before Slack, daily emails, daily texts, phone calls, walk-bys the office from the CEO, but I didn't have a seat at the table. Mm. And finally, he said to me, why is it so important to you? You are in charge of something that is very integral to the business, and you're making an impact. We're just a bunch of people in a room talking. It's not that exciting. And I didn't have the professional maturity or, context to understand that he was right. And I was saying the exact same thing to this director of paid media just yesterday, saying, like, I get the desire to be there, but having passion and showing results in what you do, being the department that the CEO doesn't need to worry about, that's how you make your mark. You don't have to have the seat at the table to make your mark. And actually, like, the fewer meetings I can be in, the happier I am and the more effective I can be.
Isn't that true?
So it's kind of like, you don't have to have a seat at that official table. Learn to say no, including to meetings. Yeah. So that you have more creative time, productive time. And I would say the final thing would be empathy, both for your customers, for your colleagues, for your team, to really understand, like, what's motivating their decisions, their actions, their wants and hopes. Because I think it just helps you speak to them better, position a product better, and craft an experience that's more optimal for them.
Such great advice that we can all definitely benefit from. But I'd love for you to just touch a little bit more on your work with nonprofits and yes. How, once your client or whomever decides to work with one, is your process the same with nonprofits? And I'd love an example of what you do in that sector.
Sure. So it's slightly different, and it's changed over time, partly because I had some give back projects that probably weren't as effective as I would like to be, if I'm being honest. So what I've learned over time is that it's best to sort of craft one or two key areas where I will help and agree on deliverables that the nonprofit team will take and can work with and can do something with. So, I had a give back project maybe 5 years ago. And I just remember feeling when I was giving the deck to them, like, oh, I just don't know if they're going to do even half of the things in here. And it just didn't feel great because it probably would have felt more productive and fulfilling on both ends if we did half the things. And I gave them something that they actually really wanted and needed urgently. So, for example, what was something that's very common for nonprofits is updating the messaging for their brand or their website. Because oftentimes they'll have to work with an agency who may charge quite a bit of money.
Right.
I've certainly come across this phenomena where I think that there's sort of a niche of agencies that work specifically with nonprofits.
Mhm.
And to be honest, they kind of overcharge. I
Yeah.
don't know what other way to say it. And it's really discouraging and disheartening.
Yeah.
They also try and sort of like lock the nonprofit into a multi-month, multi-year situation. And oftentimes I'm like, look, let's build it in Squarespace or let's build it in
Yeah.
WordPress. And so that your team can change language yourselves, or you can go onto a freelancer platform and choose from any number of people who
Yeah.
can do something cost effectively for you. So it's really about kind of figuring out, something that is concrete that I can deliver, an SEO strategy, a content calendar for the year, a marketing roadmap for the year. For work that I recently did, it was looking at all of their emails and expanding them. So rewriting the emails, expanding them. They didn't have a win back campaign, for example. They didn't have, the equivalent of return to cart or abandoned cart, right? So trying to take some of those classic e-commerce principles, apply them to donors, to your earlier
Right.
point that you can just substitute customers for donors. And it feels really good to say, like, here are the emails we reviewed. You said, yes, I'm going to put them into MailChimp, HubSpot, whatever. And then to receive them, 3 weeks
Right.
later, because
That's awesome.
they could implement it, and I could really feel like I made a difference, took something off their plate so they can focus on the great programming that they're doing and making a difference to the community that they're focused on.
Well, it's so awesome that this is built into your business plan. I think it's fantastic because the organizations you work with, I would almost guarantee would otherwise no way be able to afford to use somebody like you and have that. And I almost would also guarantee they don't have that expertise on staff and never would be able to. So that's so awesome. But as we start to wind down, what really kind of keeps you excited and energized about the future?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I've been really interested in just how our communication and what we consume as people in this world, how it's changed so much.
Yeah.
And I see the changes in myself. So, we have all the streaming platforms. I don't watch anything scripted anymore. I can't even believe it. And I don't even watch like a 20-minute reality show. I watch everything on YouTube and TikTok. I love to cook, and I kind of grew up watching 30-minute shows on Food Network. I mean, if I can't get a recipe in 35 seconds, or it's dead to me. It's so
That's funny.
interesting how things have changed, how communities connect, and just to see those bonds kind of form, both positive and negative, right? Like there's so much about how we interact with each other that, particularly for young females, I have 2 daughters, and I am holding off on social media as long as
Oh,
humanly possible for them.
good luck.
But there's something about, like, thinking of a product that I want to buy and going to YouTube or going to TikTok and searching for reviews on it.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, sort of the way that people thought about TripAdvisor reviews for travel, it's, it's kind of evolved and become bite-sized and
Um,
really fun. Like I love the music aspect of TikTok. I love sort of how everyday people sort of repeat the same thing to each other and mirror each other. There's some really fun aspects to it that I think are connecting, but also are sort of breaking down how we used to do things and building us back up in new ways.
well, that will keep demand for your services high because everybody else has got to keep up with that too. So I'm glad you're keeping up with it. But I'll lead into what I call my Fab Four, and this is a perfect lead in because the first one is always, what is something that you will read, listen to, or watch today?
So I am a huge Disney person. This kind of came later in life. So I actually just had my 2-year cancerversary, and I am healthy.
Salute.
And thank you. And when I
You buried the
was
lead.
Yeah,
That's
I buried
awesome.
the lead. And I remember when I was recovering from my first surgery, my husband said to me, "We can go anywhere in the world that you want. Just name it. We'll make it happen." And I said, "I want to take the girls to Disney World." And
That's so
it just
great.
has become the place where we go to celebrate being together and me being healthy. And so I listen to all the podcasts. I watch all the YouTube videos. It is my
Nice.
comfort, and it is like my source of joy. So I will definitely do something like that. And of course, probably listen to some Taylor Swift.
Nice. Well, it sounds dorky, but that is the happiest place on earth.
It really is.
It really is. Can you point to somebody who's been a role model for you in the work you're doing?
Yeah, wow. Someone I know or someone who I sort of admire in the world.
Either or.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I have so many people who I consider mentors. Steve Coffer being one, Christine Peterson, who was the CMO I reported to when I first joined TripAdvisor. Something that she shared with me really early on that's always resonated with me is run, don't walk with bad news. And that's been very helpful for me in how I sort of craft my strategy and my work, where it's like, if you find a doozy, raise your hand and figure it out right away.
Such good advice.
And because burying that lead will not help anyone. I've also been really inspired just by other like kind of creators in other spaces and leaders in other spaces. So I remember when Angela Ahrens was at Burberry, she really led like the digital transformation of that brand. And then she moved on to Apple and reimagined how they did all of their stores and what their retail experience looked like. So I think it's really important to sort of balance what the digital experience is like, but also knowing that, you know, the brick and mortar experience is still a big part of telling the marketing story. Yeah, so I would say those are the people.
Those are really good ones. This one I'll say up front is probably not a fair question with hundreds of clients. But is there organizations out there that you especially admire the work they're doing or would love to give a shout out to?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I can manifest this. A dream to work with UNICEF, 100% a dream. I have just been a longtime donor, supporter of their work. Any of the international, development agencies or global funds that support children, because they're our future and they have no say in the violence or turmoil that they find themselves in. And, we're just lucky to be born in a place that's safe,
True. Lastly, probably most importantly, if somebody wants to learn more about you, reach out and find a way to work with Stronghouse, what is the best way to reach you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn at Dena Enos or at my website, www.stronghouse.us.
Awesome. We will put all that in the show notes. Dena, thank you so much. I always love having strong women leaders on my show. Just makes my day. But I wish you continued success and most importantly, continued great health.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Dena for sharing the insights she's learned through her work that can help any business. This podcast was brought to you by JC Charity Services. Positivity is the competitive advantage, and as a John Gordon certified Power of Positive trainer, I'd love to bring that competitive advantage to your organization. You can find me at makingourworldbetter.com or jay@jccharityservices.com. Let's connect and talk about it. To learn more about Dena and Stronghouse, visit stronghouse.us or find Dena on LinkedIn at Dena Enos. Check the show notes for links, and if you enjoyed this show, we'd be grateful if you'd share it with a friend. Until next time, I hope you're inspired to find a way to make our world better.